You have already died today, not once, not twice. In branches of reality splitting off from this very moment, your morning ended differently. According to one of the most respected interpretations of quantum mechanics, this is not metaphor, this is mathematics. 10,000 muons pass through every square meter of your body each minute. Each one carries the potential for mutation, for catastrophe, for an ending you never see. What if the version of you listening to this voice is not lucky, but simply the only version left who can listen? In 1957, a 26-year-old physicist proposed that the universe never chooses. It splits. Every outcome happens somewhere. His name was Hugh Everett III. He believed his own theory so completely that he treated his body with contempt. He died at 51. His ashes went in the garbage. And his daughter left a suicide note asking to join him in a parallel universe. There is a gun in quantum mechanics. It kills you in one branch and clicks empty in another. From the outside, you are dead. From the inside, you hear only the click. This is the story of quantum immortality, the man who invented it, and the price his family paid for believing it was real. If you enjoy what comes next, hit that like button and subscribe. We begin now. Right now, as you listen to this, you are being shot. Not once, not occasionally, constantly. Invisible particles from exploded stars are tearing through your body like bullets from a cosmic machine gun that never stops firing. You cannot feel them. You cannot see them, but they are there. Every second, cosmic rays are rolling dice inside your cells. Some of those dice come up wrong. A strand of DNA snaps. A mutation begins. A cancer starts its slow, silent work. Most of the time, nothing happens. Your body repairs itself, and the damage disappears. But sometimes the dice land differently. Here is what makes this strange. You keep winning. Every moment you have ever lived, you have survived an invisible lottery you did not know you were playing. The odds of any single particle causing catastrophe are small, but the sheer volume of particles is staggering. Thousands upon thousands every minute, passing through you like you are made of smoke. Consider Roy Sullivan. So between 1942 and 1977, lightning struck him 7 times. 7 separate strikes across 35 years. Each one found him like a heat-seeking missile locked onto a single human body. The odds of being struck by lightning even once in a given year are roughly 1 in a million. Roy Sullivan beat those odds 7 times over. His hair caught fire. His eyebrows burned off. His legs were scarred. Lightning threw him out of his truck, and it burned through his hat while he was fishing. Each time, somehow, he walked away, singed, damaged, alive. He died at 71 years old, not from lightning, from a gunshot wound. After surviving 7 strikes that defied mathematics itself, Roy Sullivan died from a bullet. The universe, it seems, eventually finds a way through. But before you dismiss him as a statistical outlier, a freak accident stretched across decades. Consider the others. 1971. Of Flight 508, a commercial airliner flying over the Amazon jungle. 91 people on board. Somewhere over the Peruvian rainforest, the plane encountered a thunderstorm. It broke apart at 10,000 feet. 2 miles up, the fuselage tore open and passengers fell into the sky. 90 people died. 1 survived. Her name was Juliane Koepke. She was 17 years old. Still strapped to her seat, she fell 2 miles through the canopy. She woke up the next day on the jungle floor with a broken collarbone and a gash on her arm. Alone. No radio. No supplies. No idea where she was. She walked for 11 days through the Amazon. Insects burrowed into her wounds. She drank dirty water from streams. She followed a creek bed downstream, hoping it would lead to civilization. 11 days later, she stumbled into a logging camp. Of 91 people, and the universe selected one 17-year-old girl to fall 2 miles and walk out of the jungle. 1 year later, it happened again. Actually, let me be more precise about this. When I say she fell 6 miles, I mean 6 actual miles. Straight down, through freezing air, without a parachute, and lived. Vesna Vulovic was a flight attendant on Flight 367 in 1972. The plane exploded at 33,330 feet. And that is higher than Mount Everest, higher than commercial jets typically cruise. She fell more than 6 miles in the wreckage of a destroyed aircraft. 27 other passengers died. Vesna woke up 27 days later in a hospital bed. She had no memory of the flight, no memory of the fall, no memory of the impact. She spent 16 months recovering. Her skull was fractured. Her spine was shattered. Her legs were broken. She should have been dead before she hit the ground. The cold alone should have killed her. The impact should have turned her to dust. She lived another 44 years. She died at 66 years old, peacefully, decades after falling from the edge of space. Think about what we are saying here. Falling 6 miles without a parachute and surviving is like winning the lottery every second for an hour straight. It is not unlikely. It is impossible. And yet, she woke up. Here is where the story shifts. Yet we tell ourselves these people were lucky. We use that word because we need an explanation. Lucky, fortunate, blessed. We wrap the impossible in comfortable language and move on with our day. But luck is not an explanation. Luck is an admission that we do not have one. Roy Sullivan was not lucky 7 times. Julian Kepka was not lucky for 11 days. Vesna Vulovic was not lucky for 6 miles. These are not victories against long odds. These are statistical impossibilities are how extreme that luck itself becomes meaningless. When the odds against something are 1 in millions and it happens anyway, we can call it rare. When the odds are 1 in billions and it happens to multiple people, we have to ask different questions. Why does anyone survive anything? Why do particles miss critical cells? Why do planes tear apart and leave one seat intact? Why does lightning strike a man 7 times and never kill him? The standard answer is randomness. The universe is chaotic. Sometimes chaos favors us. Sometimes it does not. But there is another answer, a stranger one, an answer that comes from the mathematics of quantum mechanics itself, an answer that suggests these survivors are not outliers at all. They are inevitable, every single one of them. Not because they beat the odds, because from their perspective, there were no odds to beat. The question is not how they survived, and the question is why anyone ever dies at all. Why does the cosmic machine gun ever hit its target? Why does the invisible lottery ever produce a losing ticket? If every outcome happens somewhere, if every possibility plays out in some branch of reality, then somewhere, everyone survives everything. Always. The version of you listening to this voice right now has survived every muon, every cosmic ray, every random cellular failure that should have ended you. Yet you have made it through an invisible gauntlet, running since the moment you were conceived. Not luck, but physics. Physics had a problem. It was called the measurement problem, and for decades, the greatest minds in the world tried to solve it. Here is what they could not explain. When you look at a particle, it snaps into a definite state. Before you look, it exists in a blur of possibilities. Every possible position, every possible speed, all at once. Then you observe it, and suddenly it chooses one position, one speed, one outcome. The mathematics described this perfectly. The wave function, they called it. A mathematical object that contains every possibility simultaneously. And when you measure it, the wave function collapses. All the other possibilities vanish. Only one becomes real, but no one could explain why. The collapse was a rule imposed from outside, like a rule in a game that no one could explain, necessary to make the math work, but fundamentally arbitrary. Where did the other possibilities go? Why did observation matter? What made looking at something change it? Physicists argued about this for 30 years. They proposed interpretations. They debated philosophy. They threw equations at each other in conference rooms. The greatest mind of the century, Albert Einstein, refused to accept it. He believed the universe was deterministic. He believed God did not play dice. And then a 12-year-old boy from Washington, D.C. wrote him a letter. His name was Hugh Everett III, technically, born November 11th, 1930. His parents divorced when he was young. His mother was a writer. His father was a military officer. Hugh was a quiet child, brilliant in mathematics, curious about everything. At 12 years old, he sent a letter to Albert Einstein asking about the fundamental nature of the universe. It was an audacious thing to do. A child writing to the most famous physicist alive, asking questions that had puzzled humanity for millennia. Einstein wrote back, "We do not know what the letter said. It has been lost to history." But something in that exchange ignited a fire that would burn for the rest of Everett's life. He became obsessed with the deepest questions, not the small puzzles of everyday physics, the big ones, the ones nobody could answer. And he graduated college in 1953 with degrees in both chemical engineering and mathematics. That same year, he entered Princeton University's physics department. Princeton was the center of the physics world. Einstein still walked its halls. The greatest minds of the generation passed each other on those tree-lined paths. Everett arrived as a graduate student with no reputation and no publications. He was 22 years old. Within a year, and he would conceive an idea that would rewrite reality itself. It happened in 1954, at a party, with sherry. He was drinking with fellow graduate students, Charles Meisner, Ege Peterson. The conversation turned to quantum mechanics, to the measurement problem, to the absurdity of wave function collapse. Everett had been thinking about this for months, turning it over in his mind, and somewhere between his second and third glass of sherry, something crystallized, and he later called it his sherry insight. The moment when everything clicked into place, the wave function never collapses. That was the answer. Not a new interpretation of the mathematics, a rejection of the fundamental assumption everyone else had made. The wave function does not collapse. It never has. It never will. The mathematics is telling us the truth, and we have been refusing to listen. If the wave function describes every possibility and it never collapses, and then every possibility must be real. When you observe a particle, you do not force it to choose one position. You become entangled with it. You split. The universe splits. One version of you sees the particle here. Another version sees it there. Both are equally real. Both continue existing. Both believe they are the only version. The branches are real but isolated, like rooms in a house with no doors between them. You can never visit the other rooms. You can never know what happens in them. But they exist, as real as the room you are standing in. Everett spent the next 2 years developing this idea. His original thesis was 137 pages long, dense with mathematics, rigorous in its logic. He called it the relative state formulation of quantum mechanics. Today, we call it the many worlds interpretation. He was 26 years old, slightly drunk on sherry when he first conceived it. A graduate student at a party, casually solving a problem that had defeated Einstein. The most profound theory of reality did not come from a Nobel laureate in a laboratory. It came from a young man who asked a simple question nobody else dared to ask. What if the mathematics is telling us the truth? What if every possibility is real? What if the universe does not choose between outcomes, but simply becomes all of them? This was not science fiction. This was mathematics. Everett showed that his interpretation was consistent with every known experiment. It made the same predictions as the standard theory. It did not add anything mystical or strange. It simply removed the arbitrary rule, the collapse, the magic moment when possibilities become certainties. Remove that rule and the math still works. Better in some ways. Cleaner, more elegant. No special role for observers. No unexplained collapse. Just the wave function, evolving according to the laws of physics. Branching, splitting, creating new realities with every quantum event. The universe was not a single story with one ending. It was every story. All endings, all at once. But what does this mean for you? What happens when the universe branches around something lethal? Max Tegmark is a physicist at MIT. In 1998, he published a paper that most of his colleagues refused to discuss at conferences. Not because it was wrong, and because it was terrifying. He called it the quantum suicide thought experiment. Others had circled this idea before him. a philosopher named Hans Moravec in 1987, a physicist named Bruno Marchal in 1988, another named Michael Lockwood in 1997. They all arrived at the same destination through different doors. Tegmark was simply the one who walked through and described exactly what he saw. Here is what he saw. Imagine a gun, not an ordinary gun. This one is connected to a device that measures the spin of a single electron. Electrons can spin in two directions. Call them up and down. The device measures the spin. If the electron spins up, the gun fires. If it spins down, the gun clicks empty. The odds are exactly 50%. Perfectly random. Not random like a coin flip, where the outcome is determined by forces we simply cannot track. Random at the deepest level of reality. Quantum random. Fundamentally unpredictable. You hold this gun to your head. You pull the trigger. In one branch, the electron spins up. The gun fires. The bullet enters your skull. Your consciousness ends. Your friends watch you die. In another branch, the electron spins down. The gun clicks. You flinch. Your heart pounds. You are alive. Both branches are real. Both continue existing. Both are you. Pull the trigger again. In one branch, you die. In another branch, click. Pull again. In one branch, a death. In another, click. After 10 pulls, the math is cold and simple. The odds of surviving 10 pulls are 1 in 1,024, roughly 1 in 1,000. If you gathered 1,000 people and they each pulled the trigger 10 times, on average, only one would survive all 10 pulls. The other 999 would be dead. From the outside, this is what observers see. They see bodies. They attend funerals. And they calculate odds and conclude that survival is vanishingly unlikely. But you are not observing from the outside. You are inside the experiment. You are the one holding the gun. From your perspective, something impossible happens. The gun clicks. Every single time. It has to. Not because you are lucky. Not because the universe favors you. Because you can only experience branches where you continue to exist. The branches where you die are real. They continue. Yet your friends mourn you in those branches. But you are not there to experience them. You cannot be. Death is not an experience. It is the absence of experience. Picture parallel movie theaters. Thousands of them. All showing the same film. You sit in the darkness, watching the story unfold. At the moment of the gunshot, the reels split. In one theater, the screen goes dark. The projector stops. The audience sits in silence. In another theater, the movie continues. The hero survives. Yet the story goes on. You can only ever sit in the theater where the movie keeps playing. The dark theaters exist. The audiences exist. But you will never find yourself among them. Pull the trigger again. The 1 in 1,024 becomes 1 in a million. Pull again. 1 in a billion. Again. 1 in a trillion. Each a billion. Again. 1 in a trillion. Each pull of the trigger thins the branches where you exist. Fewer and fewer versions of you remain. But fewer is not zero. There is always another branch. Always another click. Always another heartbeat. This is not luck. This is not faith. Not luck, but physics. The mathematics of branching guarantees that some version of you survives every quantum event, no matter how lethal, no matter how improbable. As long as there is any non-zero probability of survival, some branch contains a living version of you, and that is the only branch you can ever experience. Here is where most people make a mistake. They think this could be a test, a proof. If many worlds is true, they reason, you could demonstrate it. Load the quantum gun, pull the trigger 100 times, survive every pull, show the world that you are immortal, prove that Everett was right. The mistake is thinking anyone else would ever see it. To you, the gun clicks 100 times, 200 times, 1,000 times. You become certain. You know the theory is correct. You have lived it. But look around the room. Everyone who started watching you is gone. And not because they left, because in the branches where you survived, they watched you die. Pull after pull after pull. Your friends saw your body fall. They saw blood. They buried you. In every branch where an observer exists to confirm your survival, that observer also watched you fail at some earlier point. The proof exists only in your private experience. Immortality that cannot be shared, cannot be demonstrated, cannot be published in any journal. Yet you sit alone in a room full of corpses that are all you, clicking an empty gun, knowing something that no one else in your branch will ever believe. From the outside, quantum suicide looks like ordinary suicide. One pull, maybe two, then death. The observers conclude that many worlds is unprovable at best, wrong at worst. They write papers. They win arguments. They are correct from their perspective. From your perspective, the gun has never fired. The gun will never fire. And the gun cannot fire, because firing would require you to experience non-existence. And non-existence is not an experience. In one branch, your funeral happens tomorrow. Your family weeps. Your name is carved into stone. In another branch, you set down the gun with trembling hands. You walk outside. The sun is warm on your face. You are alive. You will always be alive. Not because death does not happen to you. It happens constantly, in billions of branches splitting off with every heartbeat. Versions of you die. Car accidents, heart attacks, aneurysms, cancer. The universe kills you over and over and over again. You just never experience any of them. You cannot die from your own perspective. That sounds like a gift. Let me tell you why it is a curse. A curse. That word hangs in the air. But before we understand why, we need to understand what humanity has always believed immortality should be, because we have been chasing it for as long as we have been writing words. Jeanne Calment was born in France in 1875. She met Vincent van Gogh when she was 13. She watched the Eiffel Tower being built. She lived through 2 world wars, the invention of flight, the moon landing, the internet. She died in 1997 at 122 years and 164 days old, the longest any human being has ever been confirmed to live. 122 years, longer than most nations last, longer than most family names survive, longer than the memory of almost anyone who knew her as a child. And it was not enough. It was never going to be enough, because even Jeanne Calment, who outlived everyone she ever knew, still died, still felt her body fail, still reached an end. We have always wanted more. The ancient Sumerians kept records of their kings. These were not ordinary records. According to their lists, some kings ruled for 43,200 years, not lifetimes. Single reigns, one ruler on one throne for longer than modern humans have had civilization. We know this is mythology, but think about what it reveals. 5,000 years ago, when writing was new, when history was just beginning, the first thing humans did was imagine leaders who lived forever. The very concept of kingship was built on the fantasy of endless life. This was the original dream. This was what power was supposed to mean. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest story we have, older than the Bible, older than Homer, older than every book you have ever heard of. It was written on clay tablets in a language that has been dead for 3,000 years. And it is about one thing, a king who cannot accept that he will die. Gilgamesh watches his best friend die. He holds the body. He waits for days, hoping his friend will wake up, until a worm crawls from the nose and he finally understands. Death is real. Death is coming for him too. He travels to the edge of the world, past the mountains where the sun rises, across the waters of death that no mortal has ever crossed. He finds a man who was granted eternal life by the gods, and that man tells him about a plant growing at the bottom of the sea, a plant that would make him young again. Gilgamesh dives. He finds the plant. He holds immortality in his hands. On the journey home, he stops to bathe in a pool. A serpent smells the plant. It slithers from the water and swallows it whole. The snake sheds its skin and becomes young. Gilgamesh returns home empty-handed to wait for death like everyone else. The first story ever written is about reaching for eternal life and failing, about having it in your grasp and losing it, about the universe saying no. We have never stopped reaching. Qin Shi Huang unified China in 221 BCE and the first emperor of the first dynasty. He built the Great Wall. He standardized writing, currency, weights and measures. He created a nation that still exists 2,000 years later. But that was not enough. He wanted to live forever. He sent expeditions across the sea to find the islands where immortals lived. Hundreds of young men and women. Ships full of gifts for the gods. None of them ever returned. Some historians believe they landed in Japan and simply never came back. When the expeditions failed, the emperor turned to alchemy. His court physicians created pills from mercury. The silvery liquid metal was believed to contain the essence of immortality. It shimmered like something divine. It felt like magic. He took the mercury pills faithfully. He was seeking eternal life. The mercury killed him at 49. The first emperor of China, the most powerful man in his world, died from the cure for death. And the very thing meant to save him is what ended him. This is the first irony of the immortality quest. The harder you reach, the faster you fall. The pattern repeats across every civilization. The philosopher's stone in Europe, alchemists spending their entire lives trying to transmute base metals into gold, believing the same process would create an elixir of eternal youth, generations of brilliant minds pouring mercury, sulfur, and lead into crucibles, breathing the fumes, dying young from the poisons they thought would save them. The fountain of youth that drew Ponce de Leon across an ocean, a spring somewhere in the wilderness whose waters would wash away age. He searched until he died from a wound that would not heal. Every civilization builds monuments, pyramids, temples, tombs, stone that lasts when flesh fails. This is the compromise we make with death. If we cannot live forever, at least our names can. At least our buildings can. At least something we touched can outlast us. The pyramids at Giza have stood for 4,500 years. The pharaohs who built them are dust. Their bodies rotted despite the mummification. Their souls did not journey to the afterlife, but the stones remain. We build monuments because we cannot make our bodies outlast themselves. Today, the dream wears a different mask. Cryonics, bodies frozen at the moment of death, get preserved in liquid nitrogen at -196 degrees Celsius. The hope is that future technology will be able to repair whatever killed you, reverse the freezing damage, and wake you up. Hundreds of people are frozen right now in facilities in Arizona and Russia, waiting for a future that may never come. Transhumanism, the belief that technology will let us merge with machines, upload our minds, replace our failing organs with artificial ones, become something more than human, something that does not age, something that does not die. These are the new expeditions to find the islands of the immortals, the new alchemists seeking the philosopher's stone, the same dream wearing modern clothing. Throughout all of human history, immortality has been the ultimate prize, the reward for the greatest kings, the gift of the gods, the final frontier. Every story, every religion, every scientific project reaching for the same thing: more time, endless time, time without end. And we imagine it as youth preserved, strength maintained, consciousness continuing in a body that never fails. We imagine waking up each morning for 1,000 years, 10,000 years, forever, and being grateful for each one. This is what immortality is supposed to be. This is what we have always believed we wanted, and quantum mechanics suggests we already have it. The branching of worlds, the continuity of consciousness, the mathematical impossibility of experiencing your own end. It has been true since the beginning. It will be true until the universe itself dies. You are already immortal. You have always been immortal. And here is the nightmare. You imagine death as a light switch. On, then off. One moment you exist. The next moment you do not. This is how we comfort ourselves. The idea that when it comes, it will be quick, clean, a door closing. This is not how death works. Death is a process, a cascade, as a slow unraveling of systems that took decades to build. Your heart does not simply stop. It struggles first. It falters. It recovers. It falters again. The rhythm becomes irregular, then chaotic, then still. But even stillness is not the end. Your brain does not shut down like a computer powering off. It dims. Regions go dark in sequence, some holding on longer than others. The parts that handle vision might fade first, then hearing, then the deep structures that regulate breathing, air temperature, the things you never had to think about. These ancient regions, built before mammals existed, they fight the longest. Neurons die over minutes, not seconds. Minutes. In those minutes, consciousness does not vanish. It contracts. Your awareness narrows like a tunnel closing in. The world shrinks. Sounds become distant. Thoughts become fragmented. But you are still there, fading, present for your own dissolution. This is what medicine knows. This is what emergency rooms see. A death is not a moment. It is a gradient, a slow dimmer switch that takes its time reaching zero. And here is what quantum mechanics adds to this picture. The dimmer never reaches zero. In one branch, a neuron fires its last signal and falls silent. In another branch, that same neuron finds enough oxygen, enough glucose, enough of whatever it needs to fire one more time, one more flicker of electrochemical activity, one more moment of awareness. In one branch, your heart stops completely. In another branch, some residual electrical activity triggers one more weak contraction, not enough to revive you, just enough to extend the process. In one branch, the cascade completes. In another branch, it pauses, stutters, finds one more moment where the system holds together. Picture a light on a slow dimmer. Someone is turning it down, degree by degree, and it gets darker and darker in the room. But the dimmer never quite reaches the bottom. Always one more notch, always one more degree of brightness, always one more flicker of awareness, thin as a candle flame in a hurricane, but still burning. This is quantum immortality, not a reprieve from death, an extension of dying, a radio signal getting weaker and weaker. The static grows, the music fades, the words become impossible to understand. But if you listen carefully, through all that noise, you can still hear something, a voice, a fragment of melody. So the signal never fully disappears. It just becomes buried under interference, still transmitting, still there, but unreachable. You do not escape death, you stretch it into eternity. Consider what this means for aging. You are 80 years old, your joints ache, your vision is clouded, your hearing has faded to the point where conversations become exhausting. The friends you grew up with have started to die. This is normal. This is expected. This is the price of a long life. And you reach 90. Your world contracts to a single room. Walking is difficult. The names of people you loved slip away and return in fragments. You look in the mirror and see a stranger wearing your face. Somewhere inside, you are still you. But the machinery that houses you is failing. In most branches, you die. The cascade completes. The process ends. There is silence. But in one branch, you do not. In one branch, yet the stroke that should have killed you only damages part of your brain. You survive, diminished, confused, but aware. In one branch, the heart attack leaves you weaker, but breathing. In one branch, the infection fights to a stalemate, and you live on, trapped in a body that wanted to stop. You reach 100. Your world is a bed by a window. You cannot walk. You cannot read. The faces that visit you are kind, but they are strangers. Everyone you knew is gone. Everyone you loved is decades in the ground. You reach 120, 150, 200. Your world contracts further. A single bed, a single window looking out on a world you do not recognize. The language people speak has shifted. The music sounds wrong. The buildings outside have changed. 4 centuries have passed, and you are still here. This is the part that gets me, not the physics. The loneliness. 500 years old. Everyone you ever loved, dead for 4 centuries. Every face you see, a stranger. The language has changed. The world has changed. And you cannot leave. Your memories dissolve, not all at once, slowly. The name of your first love fades first, then their face, then the feeling of what it was like to be young and in love with them. These things slip away like sand through fingers, and you cannot hold them, but your awareness persists. In one branch, you finally, mercifully, lose consciousness. In another branch, yet you wake up again. The cascade pauses. The dimmer holds. You are still here. Think of the oldest human ever verified, a woman who saw the invention of the automobile, the airplane, the atomic bomb, the internet, who outlived her daughter, her grandson, her doctor, who spent her final years blind, nearly deaf, confined to a wheelchair. Her world shrunk to the size of a nursing home room. That was after 122 years. Quantum immortality suggests this is not the end point, yet it is the beginning. Extend that existence. Double it. Triple it. Imagine watching centuries pass from a body that cannot move, cannot see, cannot hear clearly, cannot remember why it hurts, but knows that it does. Unable to die, unable to truly live. This is not immortality as we dreamed it. This is immortality as physics describes it. Not eternal youth, eternal degradation. Not endless possibility, endless contraction. Not a gift, a sentence. Yani, the man who invented this theory understood it completely. He saw what it implied. He knew what waited at the end of the branching paths. And he treated his own body with the contempt of someone who believed he could not escape. He went to work for the Pentagon. But first, we need to understand what he was fighting against. Because Hugh Everett did not fail because his physics was wrong. He failed because his physics was heresy. In the 1920s, a group of physicists gathered in Copenhagen around a man named Niels Bohr. They were trying to make sense of the quantum world. The experiments were showing impossible things. Particles that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Waves that became particles when you looked at them. Probabilities instead of certainties. Bohr and his colleagues built a framework to handle this madness. They called it the Copenhagen interpretation. It became the official story of quantum mechanics. And the version taught in every university. The version in every textbook. The version that dominated physics for half a century. At its heart was a single rule. When you measure a quantum system, the wave function collapses. Before measurement, a particle exists as a smear of possibilities. It could be here, it could be there, it could be spinning one way or the other. The mathematics describes all these possibilities simultaneously, are layered on top of each other like ghosts occupying the same space. Then you look at it, you measure it, and suddenly the wave function collapses. All those possibilities vanish except one. The particle is here, not there, spinning this way, not that way, one outcome, one reality. The ghosts disappear. This collapse was the foundation of Copenhagen. It was the rule that separated the quantum world from the classical world, the boundary between the fuzzy and the solid. In the border between possibility and fact, there was just one problem. No one could explain it. Picture an empire built on an invisible foundation. The towers reach toward the sky. The walls are thick and strong. Everyone can see the building. Everyone lives inside it, but no one can explain what holds it up. No one can point to the foundation. No one can describe its shape or material. The building simply stands, and everyone agrees not to ask why. That was Copenhagen. The wave function collapses. Why? Because it does. When does it collapse? When you measure it. What counts as a measurement? Whatever we say counts. Where exactly does quantum end and classical begin? We do not discuss this. These questions were not welcomed. They were treated as naive, as missing the point. Bohr had a phrase for people who pushed too hard on the foundations. He said they had not yet understood quantum mechanics. The implication was clear. Stop asking. The collapse was imposed like a rule in a game that no one could explain, but everyone had to follow. Roll the dice, and one face lands up. Why that face? The rules say so. Do not ask what makes the dice choose. Just accept that it does. For 30 years, this worked. The math made predictions. The predictions matched experiments. Who cared about philosophy? Physics was about calculating, not questioning. The empire stood because questioning the foundation was not permitted. Then, a 22-year-old graduate student at Princeton started asking questions. Everett looked at the wave function and saw something the Copenhagen physicists refused to see. The collapse was arbitrary. It was not derived from the mathematics. It was added on top of the mathematics. A patch, a fix, a rule imposed from outside to make the equations match what we observed. What if you removed it? His original thesis ran to 137 pages. 137 pages of careful mathematics showing that you did not need the collapse. The wave function could evolve smoothly, continuously, without ever snapping into a single outcome. All you had to do was accept that every possibility was real. Every branch continued. Every outcome happened somewhere. The wave function never collapses. This was not a more complicated theory. This was a simpler one. The Copenhagen interpretation required an extra rule, as an unexplained mechanism that kicked in at some undefined moment. Everett's interpretation required nothing extra, just the mathematics, allowed to run without interruption. The radical idea was removing the arbitrary rule. The conservative establishment was the one clinging to the unexplained magic. His advisor was John Wheeler, a brilliant physicist who recognized Everett's genius. Wheeler also recognized the political reality. Niels Bohr was the emperor of quantum physics, and his word was law. His interpretation was doctrine. Challenging it openly was career suicide. Wheeler convinced Everett to cut the thesis. 137 pages became 36. The sharp edges were filed down. The direct challenges to Copenhagen were softened. The revolutionary document became a polite suggestion. On April 23, 1957, Everett defended his shortened thesis. It passed. The paper was published, and nothing happened. The physics community did not engage with it. They did not argue against it. They did not attempt to refute it. They simply ignored it. Silence. As if he had never written anything at all. 2 years later, Everett traveled to Copenhagen. He would meet Bohr himself. He would explain his ideas directly. Surely, face to face, the logic would be undeniable. The mathematics would speak for itself. The meeting lasted less than 2 hours. Bohr was polite. He listened, he nodded, and he offered nothing. No engagement with the substance. No acknowledgement that the wave function collapse was a problem worth solving. No admission that the foundation of his empire might be invisible. The conversation ended. Everett left Copenhagen. Nothing changed. Imagine working for years on a solution to a problem that everyone agrees exists, but no one wants to solve. Imagine proving that the accepted answer relies on magic, on an unexplained rule that appears from nowhere. Imagine offering a cleaner, more elegant alternative that requires no magic at all. And imagine having the door slammed in your face by the man whose magic you just made unnecessary. Bohr's silence hit like a door closed against the future. Not an argument, not a refutation, just dismissal. The empire did not need to defend itself. The empire simply decided what was true. The wave function never collapses. Everett knew this. The mathematics showed it. The logic demanded it. But the establishment had decided otherwise. And the establishment did not answer to logic. He returned to America with his degree and his ignored paper and his certainty that he was right. The physics world had rejected him, not because he was wrong, because he had challenged the wrong people. Rejected by the establishment he sought to revolutionize, Hugh Everett did what many physicists do when the universe disappoints them. He went to work for the Pentagon, and the physics world had rejected him. So Hugh Everett went where rejected physicists sometimes go. He went to war, not the battlefield, the numbers behind it, the calculations that determine who lives and who dies before a single missile leaves its silo. He joined the Weapons Systems Evaluation Group at the Pentagon. His new job was simple to describe and impossible to comprehend. Calculate optimal nuclear strategies and determine how many Soviet citizens would die under various attack scenarios. Model the aftermath of thermonuclear exchange. Find the numbers that would maximize enemy casualties while minimizing American losses. The mathematics of mass death. Picture a man sitting at a desk. He is 28 years old. 2 years ago, he proved that the universe splits into infinite branches at every quantum moment, that every possibility becomes real. that nothing truly ends because everything continues somewhere. That man is now calculating how many millions of people can be killed most efficiently. Infinity and annihilation meeting in the same mind. Yes, there is something almost poetic about this career change. The man who theorized that no one truly dies, spending his days planning how to kill everyone at once. The defender of universal survival, becoming the architect of universal destruction. Or perhaps it is not poetic at all. Perhaps it is logical. We do not know what Everett thought as he ran those calculations. We do not know if his theory comforted him or horrified him. The truth is, no one knows what it feels like to truly believe the universe branches. Maybe it feels like nothing. Maybe that is the point. Think about what his theory actually implies. If every quantum event creates a new branch, then every death is also a survival. Every extinction is also a continuation. Drop a nuclear bomb on a city, and yes, millions die in this branch. But in countless other branches, the bomb malfunctioned. The order was never given. The war never started. And does that make the deaths meaningless? For most of us, the answer is obvious. Of course not. The suffering here is real. The death here matters. The grief of survivors here cannot be erased by parallel worlds where everything turned out fine. But Everett was not most of us. He spent his days with spreadsheets of projected casualties. Megadeaths. That was the actual term they used. 1 megadeath equals 1 million dead human beings. He would run scenarios with 10 megadeaths. 50 megadeaths, 100 megadeaths, each number representing a mountain of corpses too vast for any mind to truly grasp. And somewhere in his calculations, perhaps a thought occurred to him. A thought that would be monstrous in any other context. A thought that only makes sense if you have completely internalized the idea that reality branches. None of these people truly die. They just stop existing in this particular branch. Somewhere else, they continue. Somewhere else, as the missiles never flew. If you believe that, truly believe it, then mass death becomes an accounting problem. A subtraction from this ledger, but not from the total. The horror is not the death toll. The horror is the detachment. Everett was uniquely suited to calculate extinction without flinching. In 1964, he helped found Lambda Corporation, a defense consulting firm. They continued the same work. More scenarios, more projections, and more ways to end civilization efficiently. By 1973, he had founded his own company, DBS Corporation. Defense contracts kept flowing. The money followed. He became wealthy. He never returned to physics. The academic world had treated his ideas like a contagious disease. They had shortened his thesis, ignored his insights, dismissed his meeting with Bohr as if it had never happened. The establishment had closed ranks against him. Fine, he seemed to say. Keep your wave function collapse. Keep your unexplained magic. I will go somewhere. My mathematics is appreciated. The Pentagon appreciated him. They did not care about philosophical implications. They cared about accuracy. They cared about predicting outcomes. They cared about winning a war that everyone prayed would never happen. Everett gave them what they wanted. Clean numbers, cold projections, the dispassionate calculus of mutually assured destruction. Meanwhile, his theory gathered dust. For nearly 2 decades, almost no one in physics engaged with many worlds. It sat in academic libraries, occasionally cited, rarely discussed. A curiosity from the 1950s, a path not taken. Everett watched from a distance. Or perhaps he did not watch at all. Perhaps he had truly moved on, finding in nuclear strategy something that physics had denied him. Recognition, money, the sense that his work mattered. Even if what mattered was calculating the end of the world. There is a strange symmetry here. The universe branches infinitely, and everything survives. Nuclear war branches infinitely too, and in some branches, everyone survives. The same mathematics underlies both ideas. Probability cascading through possibility, splitting reality into countless paths. Everett understood both kinds of branching. He had proven one, and now he calculated the other. Some people who knew him said he seemed detached, remote. as if the physical world held less reality for him than the abstract spaces in his mind. He was brilliant at parties, they said, funny, engaging. But there was something missing, some fundamental connection to the present moment. Perhaps when you truly believe in infinite branches, the present loses its weight. This moment is just one of countless moments. This choice is just one of countless choices. Everything that can happen does happen. Why commit to any single path when all paths are equally real? His body reflected this detachment. His relationships reflected it too. But the mathematics of extinction was not the only thing Everett was careless about. There was also his body, and there was also his family. He smoked 3 packs of cigarettes every day, 60 cigarettes. From morning until he fell asleep, the smoke filled his lungs, his clothes, every room he entered, and he drank heavily. Alcohol at lunch, alcohol at dinner, alcohol after dinner. He ate without restraint, his body expanding year after year. This was not depression. This was not despair. This was something stranger. Hugh Everett treated his physical form with the casual indifference of someone who had decided it did not ultimately matter, as if this body, this particular arrangement of cells and organs, was just one configuration among countless others. Why preserve it? Why maintain it? In some branch, he was already dead. In another branch, he had never started smoking at all. The math allowed both. The math allowed everything. His home in McLean, Virginia, looked comfortable from the outside. A nice neighborhood, professional parents, 2 children, all the markers of suburban success. But from the inside, it was a mausoleum, a place where people lived parallel lives without ever truly meeting. In one branch, there was a father who engaged with his children, and who helped with homework, who attended school events, who asked about their days and listened to the answers. In another branch, there was Hugh Everett. His son Mark would later describe growing up in a house where his father existed as furniture, physically present but emotionally absent, a shape in a chair rather than a parent, a body that occupied space without filling it with warmth or attention or the ordinary currency of family life. Mark watched his father sit in the living room, his cigarette in one hand, drink in the other, the television on, the eyes somewhere else entirely, perhaps calculating branching probabilities, perhaps lost in mathematical spaces that had no room for a child's questions or a child's needs. Everett treated his family like branches he could observe but never merge with. He was in the same house, the same rooms, eating the same meals, but he existed at a remove. He separated by some invisible barrier that theory had erected between himself and everyone he should have loved. His wife Nancy enabled his habits. She refilled the glasses. She bought the cigarettes. She watched him destroy himself and said nothing, or perhaps had stopped saying anything years ago. Some partnerships become conspiracies of silence. Some marriages survive only by never speaking the obvious. In one branch, Nancy confronted him, demanded change, issued ultimatums, and perhaps saved his life. In another branch, she made peace with the version of her husband who was slowly disappearing even as he sat across from her at the dinner table. This was the branch they lived in. Their daughter Elizabeth struggled. From childhood, something was wrong. Mental illness settled into her like weather that would not lift. She fought it. She fought it for years. 9 times she tried to end her own life. 9 times she survived. And the number is almost unbearable to hold in your mind. 9 attempts. 9 moments of absolute despair followed by survival. 9 returns to a life that had become too painful to endure, but that refused to release her. In one branch, she had a father who noticed, who intervened, who wrapped his arms around her and said he would not let go until she believed she was worth holding on to. In another branch, she had Hugh Everett. He existed in the same house as his suffering daughter, and he observed her pain the way he observed everything else, from a distance, as data, as one outcome among many, in a universe where all outcomes were equally real. The surprise is not that Everett was emotionally distant. Many people are emotionally distant. Many parents fail their children through simple neglect or their own unresolved pain. The surprise is the direct line from theory to tragedy. Everett's emotional detachment was not a personal failing unrelated to his work, and it was the logical consequence of truly believing his own physics. If every outcome happens somewhere, why invest deeply in any particular one? If all branches are equally real, why fight to change this one? If your daughter survives in countless worlds, does her suffering in this world carry the same weight? This is where mathematics meets flesh. This is where theory becomes a way of living, or a way of failing to live. His children needed a father who was present, and who believed that this moment, this conversation, this dinner, this afternoon mattered more than any other. They needed someone who had chosen their branch and committed to it completely. Instead, they got a man who had distributed his attention across infinity, who held something back in every interaction because his deepest conviction was that no single interaction was final. No single outcome was the only outcome. Every outcome happens. Yeah, the phrase sounds liberating when you first hear it, like infinite possibility, like endless second chances. But watch it play out in a family and it becomes something else entirely. It becomes permission to never fully arrive, to never fully commit, to always exist slightly elsewhere in some other branch where things might be different. Mark grew up and became a rock musician. He formed a band. He wrote songs. He lived loudly, perhaps in reaction to the silence of his childhood, and he would later make a documentary about his father, trying to understand the man who had shared his home but never quite shared his life. Elizabeth continued to struggle, year after year, attempt after attempt. The 9th time she survived, she was still alive, still fighting, still waiting, perhaps for something to change. The house in McLean, Virginia, held all of them. 4 people under one roof, 4 separate existences running parallel without intersection. The father calculating, the mother enabling, the son watching, the daughter drowning. A family that looked like a family from the outside, but from the inside, something fundamental was missing. Some essential warmth that makes a collection of people into something more than bodies occupying the same address. Hugh Everett died on July 19, 1982. He was 51 years old. His heart simply stopped. But the real tragedy was still coming. And he was 51 years old when his heart stopped. July 19, 1982. A bedroom in McLean, Virginia. The body on the bed. The cigarettes finally collecting their debt. His son Mark was 19. Old enough to be called a man. Young enough to be destroyed by what he found. There is no preparation for discovering your father's body. No manual. No warning. You walk through a door expecting the ordinary rhythms of a household, and instead, you find stillness. Oh, the kind of stillness that changes everything that comes after. Mark found him on the bed, not sleeping, not resting, gone. The flesh remained, but whatever had animated it had departed, or branched, or scattered across infinite parallel worlds where Hugh Everett continued breathing, continued smoking, continued drinking, continued calculating. That is what the theory would suggest. The wave function never collapses. Everett had written those words decades earlier, and he had defended them before skeptical examiners. He had carried them through years of rejection and indifference. And now, in this branch at least, the man who believed them had stopped. His body remained. A container, a vessel, a statistical artifact. Everett had left instructions. They were simple. They were direct. They were horrifying to anyone who did not share his worldview. Throw my ashes in the garbage. Not scattered on a mountain. Not kept in an urn on a mantle. And not buried in consecrated ground with words spoken over the grave. The garbage. The same place you would put coffee grounds or orange peels or yesterday's newspaper. Nancy Everett, his wife, followed his instructions. She had lived with this man for years. She had watched him smoke 3 packs a day. She had watched him drink. She had watched him retreat into calculations while his children needed presents. She knew what he believed. She did what he asked. The ashes went in the trash. And this sounds like desecration. It sounds like cruelty. It sounds like a family so broken that they could not even manage the basic rituals of human grief. But that interpretation misses something essential. For Hugh Everett, this was not callousness. It was consistency, Think about what he had done for years. He had treated his body like something temporary, something expendable, something that belonged to one branch among countless branches. And he had poured smoke into his lungs knowing what it would do. He had poured alcohol into his system knowing the cost. Meal after meal, bottle after bottle, pack after pack. He was pulling a different kind of trigger, not a quantum gun, a slower weapon, one that fires across years instead of milliseconds. But the underlying logic was identical. This body, this particular arrangement of matter, did not carry ultimate significance. If it failed, he continued elsewhere. The math guaranteed it. And so when he asked for his ashes to go in the garbage, he was not expressing contempt for himself. He was expressing a philosophy. The body was packaging. The consciousness had already moved on. What remained was carbon and calcium and trace minerals. Why treat it like something sacred when everything sacred had already departed? The horror is not the act. The horror is the worldview that made the act reasonable. Most of us cannot imagine asking this of our families, yet we want our remains treated with dignity. We want ceremony. We want our loved ones to have a place they can visit, a marker they can touch, a ritual that helps them process absence. These are human needs, ancient needs, the needs of creatures who evolved to grieve. Everett had reasoned his way past those needs. He had looked at the mathematics of branching and concluded that grief itself was parochial, a reaction to incomplete information. And if you truly understood that every version of yourself continued somewhere, what was there to mourn? The man in this branch had stopped. The man in other branches had not. The ashes were just the residue of one particular branch reaching its terminus. Mark Everett would carry that mourning with him for the rest of his life, finding the body, watching his mother dispose of the ashes, trying to make sense of a father who had been physically present but emotionally unreachable, and who had developed a theory about consciousness surviving across infinite worlds but could not survive the ordinary demands of being a parent in this one. Years later, Mark would say he understood his father better through the physics than through the memories. The memories were fragments, distant, cold, a man in the house who seemed to be looking through walls into somewhere else. But the equations were clear. The theory was elegant. And maybe, Mark thought, and that was where his father had actually lived, not in the bedroom, not at the dinner table, not in conversations with his children, in the mathematics, in the branching, in the infinite everywhere that made any particular here feel temporary. The body on the bed was just one outcome among infinities of outcomes. The ashes in the garbage were just molecules returning to molecules. The man himself was elsewhere, everywhere, continuing. That is what the theory says. And whether it offered any comfort to a 19-year-old standing in a doorway is a different question entirely. Nancy Everett survived her husband. She continued in the house they had shared. She continued with the habits they had built together. She continued with their daughter Elizabeth, who was still struggling, still fighting, still surviving. The math survived too. The papers Everett had written, the equations he had derived, and the theory that had been rejected and ignored and dismissed was still there, waiting for physics to catch up, waiting for a generation of scientists who had not been trained by Bohr, waiting for the vindication that would come too late for the man, but not for the ideas. 14 years passed. The theory gained acceptance. The man remained ashes in a landfill somewhere. And then, 14 years after Hugh Everett died, his daughter Elizabeth wrote a suicide note, and it was addressed to a parallel universe. 1996. Elizabeth Everett was 39 years old. She had been fighting for most of those years, fighting against something inside her that kept pulling her toward an exit. She had reached for that exit before, many times, and each time something had pulled her back. A friend, a hospital, a moment of hesitation, the branches where she continued, but branches end. On this day, in this branch, Elizabeth Everett did not continue, and she left a note, and that note may be one of the most heartbreaking documents in the history of science. Not because of what it says about her suffering, but because of what it says about what she believed. Elizabeth asked for her ashes to be thrown in the garbage, just like her father's. She wanted to join him, not in heaven, not in some abstract afterlife. She wanted to join him in a parallel universe. She was addressing the multiverse like it was a postal system, and like dropping her remains in the same place his remains had been dropped would somehow deliver her to the same destination. A daughter writing to branches of reality the way other daughters might write to God. She believed. That is the thing that changes everything about this story. Elizabeth Everett was not rejecting reality. She was not giving up on meaning. She was applying her father's theory with complete faith. Yet she had grown up in a house where the walls were saturated with cigarette smoke and the conversation was saturated with physics, where her father spoke about consciousness continuing across infinite branches, where death was not an ending but a transition. She listened. She believed. And when the weight became too heavy to carry in this particular branch, she saw a doorway, the same doorway her father had described in his equations, at the same doorway he had walked through when his heart stopped in that bedroom. She was not writing a suicide note. She was writing a travel plan, instructions for reaching a destination, coordinates for finding her way to a branch where her father might finally be present in a way he never was in this one. The ashes in the trash were not an expression of worthlessness. They were a ticket, the only ticket she knew how to buy. Sit with that for a moment. A daughter who never felt close to her father in life, who watched him disappear into equations and cigarette smoke, who lived in the same house but existed in different worlds. And in the end, the only way she could imagine reaching him was by applying the mathematics he had left behind, by treating his theory as literally true, by trusting that somewhere in the vast branching of possibilities, there was a version of reality where they could finally be together. The horror is that she may have been right, and that changes nothing about how wrong it feels. If the many worlds interpretation is true, then Elizabeth is somewhere right now. Somewhere in the infinite sprawl of branching realities, there are versions of her that continued, versions that found a different path, versions that survived that day and the days after. The math says so. The equations are clear. Her consciousness does not end. It simply follows the branches where continuation is possible. But that math offered no comfort to the people left behind in this branch. The mother who had already lost her husband, the brother who had already found one body, the family that had already been shaped by this theory and was now being destroyed by it. Nancy Everett buried her daughter's ashes the way Elizabeth had requested. And then she waited. She waited with lungs that had been breathing secondhand smoke for decades. Every day in that house, every evening in that living room, every night in that bedroom, the air was never clean. Her husband had filled it with the residue of his indifference to physical reality. 60 cigarettes a day, burning down to ash while he worked on equations, while he drank, while he ignored the body he was slowly poisoning and the family he was slowly abandoning. Yes, the smoke did not care about the many worlds interpretation. The smoke was just particles, carcinogens, damage accumulating in tissue over years, a slow violence that needed no intent. In 1998, 2 years after Elizabeth died, Nancy Everett was diagnosed with lung cancer. She had never smoked a day in her life. Her husband had smoked enough for both of them, and his smoke had found its way into her body, the way his theory had found its way into their daughter's mind. Both of them weapons, both of them killing across years, one through tar and carbon, one through ideas and implications. Nancy died that same year. The Everett family was destroyed. A father dead at 51, a daughter dead at 39, a mother dead from breathing air her husband had poisoned. All of them connected by a physics paper written in 1957. All of them casualties of taking an idea seriously, of believing that consciousness continues, and that bodies do not matter, that this particular branch is just one branch among infinitely many. Mark Everett was the only one left, the boy who had grown up in that house, the teenager who had found his father's body, the man who had watched his sister struggle and fail, the son who had seen his mother die from something his father had done without ever lifting a hand. He was the survivor, the one who continued in this branch. He would later make a documentary about his father, and he would try to understand the man through the mathematics the man had left behind. He would visit physicists and read papers and stand in the room where his father had defended his thesis decades earlier, searching for something, trying to find the person behind the equations. But the equations cannot tell you what it felt like to grow up in that house. The equations cannot describe the silence at dinner, the distance in a father's eyes, at the smell of smoke that never left the furniture or the curtains or the lungs of the people who had to breathe it. The theory said consciousness continues. It did not say anything about presence, about attention, about the ordinary miracle of a parent who looks at their child and actually sees them. Elizabeth believed her father's theory so completely that she used it to plan her own death. Nancy suffered the physical consequences of her husband's disregard for decades, and Mark was left to make sense of the wreckage, to find meaning in formulas that had offered his family nothing but abstraction. 3 people destroyed by believing too completely in a theory that most physicists refused to take seriously. But that is changing. The theory is winning. The theory Hugh Everett died believing is becoming the theory physics believes. But the implications reach further than parallel universes. They reach into your brain. To understand why, we have to go back. Before Everett, before Copenhagen, back to a darkened room in 1801, where a man named Thomas Young fired light at a wall. The setup was simple. Young took a beam of light and aimed it at a barrier. The barrier had 2 narrow slits cut into it. Behind the barrier was a screen that would show where the light landed. Basic geometry would predict 2 bright lines on the screen, 1 line for each slit. Light travels in straight lines. That is what everyone knew. What Young saw instead changed physics forever. The screen did not show 2 bright lines. It showed a pattern of alternating bright and dark bands, an interference pattern, the kind of pattern you see when 2 waves collide in water. Peaks meeting peaks create higher peaks. Peaks meeting troughs cancel out. The light was behaving like a wave. It was passing through both slits at once and interfering with itself on the other side. This was strange enough with a beam of light. But the real strangeness came later, when physicists learned to fire individual photons, 1 particle at a time. Surely a single photon would go through 1 slit or the other. A particle cannot split in half. It cannot be in 2 places at once. Except it can. Fire single photons 1 at a time, and the interference pattern still builds up. Each photon, somehow, is passing through both slits simultaneously, interfering with itself. A ghost walking through 2 walls at once and meeting itself on the other side. This is not metaphor. This is experimental fact, repeated thousands of times in laboratories across the world. The photon exists as a probability smear, spread across all possible paths until it hits the detector. Then it appears at a single point. The wave becomes a particle. The smear becomes a dot. Here is where physics breaks. What if you put a detector at the slits? But what if you measure which slit the photon actually goes through? The interference pattern vanishes completely. The photon behaves like a normal particle again, going through 1 slit or the other, not both. The act of looking changes what happens. This is not a matter of disturbing the photon with your detector. Physicists have run versions of this experiment so delicate that the measurement could not possibly push the photon around. The photon knows. Somehow, yet the mere fact that information about its path exists changes how it behaves. The Copenhagen interpretation had an answer. Sort of. It said the photon exists in a superposition of all possible states until observed. Then, the wave function collapses. Possibilities become a single actuality. Observation selects 1 outcome from the blur. For decades, this was the official position of physics, the textbook answer. But notice what it does not tell you. What counts as observation? A photon detector? A camera? A computer recording the data? A human looking at the computer screen? A conscious mind comprehending the result? Copenhagen draws a line between the quantum world and the classical world. Below the line, superposition and probability. Above the line, definite outcomes and solid objects. But Copenhagen cannot tell you where the line is. It cannot explain why observation matters. It cannot say what observation even means. And this is like a map maker drawing a border between two countries, but admitting they have no idea where the border actually runs, or why it exists, or what makes one side different from the other. The map looks official, the border looks real, but the map maker is guessing. Given the choice between a universe where your consciousness magically collapses reality and a universe where you just split into infinite copies every time you look at something, physicists have increasingly chosen the splitting. At least it follows the rules. Many Worlds offers a different answer. There is no collapse. There is no special role for observation. There is no line between quantum and classical. The wave function never stops doing what wave functions do. It just keeps evolving. When you measure a photon, you do not collapse the superposition. You join it. Before the measurement, the photon is in a superposition of going through both slits. After the measurement, you are in a superposition of having seen it go through the left slit and having seen it go through the right slit. Both versions of you exist. Both versions are equally real. You just cannot see the other one anymore. The interference pattern disappears not because observation collapses anything. It disappears because you have branched. Each version of you sees a consistent particle going through one slit. The wave function is still there, still intact, is still containing all possibilities. You are just inside it now, riding one branch of an infinite tree. This sounds more complicated than Copenhagen. In a sense it is. Copenhagen gives you one universe with mysterious collapse. Many Worlds gives you infinite universes with no mystery at all. But here is what matters. Many Worlds requires no new physics, no unexplained magic, no arbitrary line between observer and observed. The rules stay the same all the way up, and the observer effect that captured popular imagination, the idea that consciousness creates reality, was never a triumph of Copenhagen. It was a failure, a hole in the theory papered over with vague language about measurement. Many Worlds removes the mysticism entirely. Observation does not collapse anything. It just splits you. This is why physicists who once dismissed Everett are reconsidering. Not because splitting into infinite copies feels comfortable. It does not. But because Copenhagen never actually answered the question it claimed to answer. It just taught generations of students not to ask. The mathematics works. The predictions match experiment. The only cost is accepting that you, right now, are branching into countless versions of yourself. Every photon that strikes your eye, every electron that fires in your brain, every quantum event, however small, creating another you who experienced it differently. The theory Hugh Everett died believing is becoming the theory physics believes. But the implications reach further than parallel universes. They reach into your brain, the place where you live, the 3 pounds of tissue that somehow contains everything you have ever felt, remembered, or believed, the thing that makes you, you. 86 billion neurons. That is the number. 86 billion specialized cells, each one connecting to thousands of others, of forming a network more complex than anything humans have ever built. A city of branching highways where every intersection creates a new universe. And rush hour never ends. The traffic multiplies infinitely. But here is what matters for our story. Those neurons do not run on electricity alone. They run on chemistry. And chemistry, at its foundation, is quantum mechanics. Consider what happens when you think a thought. A signal travels down a neuron. When it reaches the end, and it needs to jump across a gap to the next neuron. That gap is called a synapse. The signal cannot jump on its own. It needs help. Calcium ions provide that help. Tiny charged particles that flood into the neuron through specialized gates called ion channels. These channels are proteins, molecular machines embedded in the cell membrane, and they open and close based on events happening at the quantum scale. The calcium enters. It triggers the release of neurotransmitters, as those chemicals float across the gap and tell the next neuron to fire or not fire. This is how thoughts happen. This is how memories form. This is how you decide to move your hand or blink your eye. Every step depends on quantum events. In one branch, the ion channel opens a fraction of a nanosecond earlier. In another branch, it opens later. In one branch, the neurotransmitter binds successfully to its receptor. In another branch, it drifts away. These differences are tiny, microscopic, but they accumulate. If the wave function never collapses, then every quantum event in your brain creates a branch. Every ion channel, every neurotransmitter release, every calcium ion finding its target. The number is staggering. 10 to the 30th power. That is a 1 followed by 30 zeros. That is how many versions of you branch off in the time it takes to form a single thought. Not per day, not per hour, per second. Let that number sit for a moment. Yes, there are roughly 10 to the 80th power atoms in the observable universe. Stars, planets, galaxies, all the matter that exists. 10 to the 30th power is smaller, but not by much. And that is happening inside your skull, every second, right now. Here is another way to think about it. Flip a coin 100 times. What are the odds of getting heads every single time? The answer is 1 in 10 to the 30th power. Those same impossible odds. Except in the many worlds interpretation, someone actually flips 100 heads in a row. There is a branch where it happens. There is a branch where anything that can happen does happen. Your brain generates that many branches faster than you can blink. Each branch contains a complete version of you, a person with your memories, your personality, your sense of self, a person who believes they are the only real one. Yes, a person who has no idea that 10 to the 30th other versions of themselves just branched off in the last second. In one branch, you scratched your nose. In another branch, you did not. In one branch, that word you were trying to remember suddenly surfaced. In another branch, it stayed buried. In one branch, you felt a flicker of sadness. In another branch, it passed before you noticed. These are not hypothetical versions of you. If the mathematics holds, they are real, that they exist right now, thinking their own thoughts, unaware of you just as you are unaware of them. The branches separate through a process called decoherence. It happens almost instantly, like ink dropped in water. The colors spread and mix, and within moments you cannot unmix them. You cannot gather the ink back into a single drop. The branches separate so completely they can never interfere with each other again. This is why you only experience one version of events, and this is why the world seems solid and consistent. Not because the other branches do not exist, but because they have become unreachable, walled off by the mathematics of quantum mechanics itself. You are not one person moving through time. You are a branching structure, a tree with 10 to the 30th new limbs every second. Each limb convinced it is the trunk. The version of you hearing these words right now is one branch, one thread in an impossibly vast tapestry. Yet the other threads are just as real, just as convinced of their own existence, just as certain that their experience is the only experience. People can imagine a few parallel universes, a version of themselves who made different choices, took the other job, married someone else, moved to another city. They cannot imagine 10 to the 30th power. The number breaks intuition. It is too large to visualize, too vast to comprehend. Yet it makes the multiverse feel less like science fiction and more like something beyond category, beyond scale, beyond human understanding entirely. And it is happening in your head, right now, with every firing neuron and every chemical cascade and every quantum flutter in the wet machinery of thought. You are not one person making choices. You are infinite people, and every choice is made, which raises a question that philosophers have asked for centuries. Is there any such thing as free will? Free will, the question philosophers have chased for thousands of years. The question you might have asked yourself in quiet moments. Do you actually choose, or does something else choose for you? The old debates focused on determinism. If every effect has a cause, and every cause has a prior cause, then perhaps your choices were set in motion at the beginning of time. Perhaps you never had any real options. Or perhaps the feeling of choosing was just that, a feeling. But quantum mechanics changed the terms of the debate. The universe is not deterministic at the quantum level. There is genuine randomness, genuine uncertainty. The electron does not know which way it will spin until the moment of measurement. Nothing knows. Not even the universe itself. This seems like it should rescue free will. If the future is not predetermined, then perhaps you really can choose. Perhaps the openness at the bottom of reality creates space for genuine decisions. The wave function never collapses. That is what the many worlds interpretation tells us. And this changes everything about free will. Not because it takes your choices away, but because it gives you all of them. In one branch, you decided to watch this video tonight. In another branch, you scrolled past. In another branch, you started watching and fell asleep. In another branch, yet you never discovered this channel at all. Every version of you made a different choice, and every version believes their choice was real. The you hearing these words is one of infinite versions. The version who chose this, who stayed awake this long, who did not turn it off. But somewhere in the branching structure of reality, another you made every other possible decision. You are not choosing between options. You are becoming all of them. Picture a tree, not a small tree. Oh, a tree so vast it contains every possible life, every marriage and every divorce, every job taken and every job refused, every word spoken and every word held back, every moment of courage and every moment of fear. The version of you who married, the version who left, the version who stayed single, the version who moved across the world, the version who never left home, the version who died young, the version who lived long, the version who never existed at all because a quantum fluctuation changed the moment your parents met. All of them real, all of them you, all of them certain they are the only one. This is not determinism. Determinism says you have no choice. This says you have every choice. Every possible choice is made by some version of you, creating a tree of decisions that contains every possible life. The feeling of choosing is real. You experience the moment of decision, yet you feel the weight of alternatives. You sense the narrowing of possibilities as you commit to one path, but the uniqueness of the outcome is not real. There is no single result, no road not taken. Every road is taken by someone who is you. Free will dissolves, not because you are a puppet, not because your strings are being pulled, but because completeness replaces constraint. Total freedom for every version. And the question shifts from whether you choose to which you does the choosing. In one branch, you are brave. In another branch, you are afraid. In one branch, you speak your truth. In another branch, you stay silent. Neither version is more real than the other. Neither version is the authentic you. They are all authentic. They are all you. This creates a strange kind of vertigo. The ground shifts beneath the concept of identity itself, which brings us to an ancient paradox, the ship of Theseus, a thought experiment from centuries ago. Imagine a ship, wooden planks, masts, sails. Over time, the planks rot and are replaced, one by one, year after year, until eventually every original plank is gone. Every piece of the ship is new. Is it still the same ship? Philosophers have debated this for ages, but in the context of quantum immortality, the paradox becomes literal. Your body replaces itself constantly. Its cells divide and die. Atoms cycle through. The matter that makes you today is not the matter that made you as a child. You are already a different ship than you were. Imagine living for 500 years, 5 centuries of continuous existence. The cells in your body turning over again and again. The atoms that compose your brain cycling through dozens of times. Nothing physical remains from the person who started the journey. At what point do you stop being you? Yes, so the wave function never collapses. Not in physics, and perhaps not in identity either. Perhaps the question of who you are has no single answer. Perhaps you are a process more than a thing, a pattern that persists even as its substrate changes entirely. The version of you at 20, the version at 50, the version at 100, the version at 300, if quantum immortality holds. Are they the same person? They share a continuous thread of memory, a story that connects them. But the material basis for that story has been replaced completely. You are the ship of Theseus. You have always been the ship of Theseus. The paradox is not abstract philosophy. It is what you are, right now, in this moment. And in the many worlds interpretation, it goes further. You are not one ship being rebuilt. You are infinite ships, branching with every quantum event, each one convinced it is the original. In one branch, you remember this moment clearly decades from now. In another branch, you forget it by morning. In another branch, something interrupts you right now and you never hear the end. All of them persist. All of them believe they are the real continuation of the person who started listening. The question is not whether you have free will. The question is not whether you persist through time. The question is which version of you is asking. And the answer is all of them. You are a statistical outlier. And the version of you listening to these words has already survived a cosmic lottery that most versions have lost. But here is what physics cannot explain. Physics cannot explain why you exist, not why you are here, in this place, at this time. That question has answers. Evolution, chance, the particular meeting of your parents, the specific moment of conception. The question physics cannot answer is different, deeper, more unsettling. Why is there someone home? Why? When photons strike your retina and electrical signals race through neural tissue, is there an experience happening? Why does it feel like something to be you? In 1995, a philosopher named David Chalmers gave this mystery a name. He called it the hard problem of consciousness. Not hard as in difficult, hard as in fundamentally different from every other problem science has ever solved. The hard problem stands like a wall at the edge of physics, a place where mathematics simply stops. You can describe every atom in a brain, every synapse firing, every chemical cascading through neural pathways. You can map the entire architecture of thought with perfect precision and still not explain why there is someone inside experiencing it. This is not a gap in our knowledge. It is not a puzzle waiting for better instruments or smarter theorists. It is a different kind of problem entirely. Every other question in physics asks how things work. This question asks why there is a what it is like at all. Consider a camera. Light enters the lens. Sensors convert photons to electrical signals. Processors transform those signals into data. The camera captures an image, but the camera does not see anything. There is no experience happening inside the camera, no inner life, no awareness of the light it absorbs. The physics is complete. Every step can be described mathematically. Yet nothing is home. Your brain processes light in roughly similar ways. Photons, signals, neural computations. But somewhere in that process, something else emerges. Something physics cannot locate. You see, not just process, not just compute. You experience the redness of red, the ache of loss, the warmth of recognition when someone you love enters a room. Where does that come from? The many worlds interpretation can describe what happens to your brain at every quantum branch, and it can trace the diverging paths of neurons and synapses across infinite timelines. In one branch, certain neurons fire. In another branch, different neurons fire. The mathematics handles this perfectly, but it cannot describe what happens to you. Not your brain, not your body, not the physical substrate that hosts your thoughts. You, the awareness reading these words, the presence behind your eyes. Consciousness threads through the multiverse like a needle through infinite fabric. But physics can only see the fabric. It tracks every fold, every weave, every intersection of matter and energy across branching realities. The thread remains invisible. This is not a failure of many worlds specifically. It is a limitation of physics itself. The discipline that unlocked atomic energy and mapped the shape of space-time has no tools for the most obvious fact of existence, that there is something it is like to be anything at all. Ed Chalmers pointed this out nearly 3 decades ago. The problem has not been solved. It has not even been meaningfully approached. Neuroscience advances, brain imaging improves. We understand more about neural correlates of consciousness every year. None of it touches the hard problem. We know which brain regions activate when you feel pain. We do not know why activation produces feeling. We know which chemicals flood your synapses when you fall in love. But we do not know why chemistry creates experience. The gap is not shrinking. The gap is not the kind of thing that shrinks. And this brings us to the limit of everything we have discussed. Quantum immortality may be mathematically coherent. The branching may continue forever. Your body may persist in some form across infinite timelines, always finding the path where survival occurs. But what happens to the thread? What happens to the needle as the fabric branches? Does awareness follow one path? Does it somehow split? Does it simply end while the body continues, an empty vessel drifting through branches with no one inside? Physics cannot answer. Physics cannot even formulate the question properly. The equations have no variable for experience. The models have no place to insert the felt quality of being alive. At the moment of death, physics runs out of answers. The brain stops functioning. Neural activity ceases. Yet the physical processes that correlate with consciousness come to an end. Many worlds can describe what happens to the atoms. They continue existing in various configurations across various branches. But what happens when the thread frays? What happens to the needle when it reaches the edge of the fabric? We do not know. After all the mathematics, after the branching timelines and quantum suicide thought experiments, after the survival statistics and the philosophical implications, yet we arrive at the same place humanity has always been, uncertain. The man who invented many worlds did not know. He believed consciousness continued in branches where survival occurred. But belief is not knowledge. Mathematical elegance is not proof. The theory describes bodies branching. It says nothing about awareness persisting. Philosophers do not know. They have debated consciousness for millennia. The hard problem remains hard. No solution has gained consensus. No breakthrough looms on the horizon. Physicists do not know. They can describe reality with extraordinary precision. Predictions confirmed to 12 decimal places. Phenomena mapped from quarks to galactic superclusters. But consciousness sits outside their equations. A ghost in the mathematics. Present everywhere. Captured nowhere. The surprise is this admission itself. Science has answered so many questions. The age of the universe. The composition of stars. The mechanisms of life. At the deep structure of matter. And energy and space and time. And yet, the most immediate fact of existence, the one thing you know with absolute certainty, that you are conscious right now, experiencing these words. Science cannot explain it, cannot describe it, cannot predict what happens to it. Quantum immortality may be true, the mathematics may hold, branches may extend forever, and it may tell us nothing about what you actually experience. The truth is, no one knows what happens when you close your eyes for the last time. Not physicists, not philosophers, not the man who invented the theory of infinite branching. We are left where we started, alive in this branch, for reasons we cannot explain. Alive in this branch, for reasons we cannot explain. But perhaps that is exactly where we need to be. Consider what it took for you to hear these words. Not the technology, and not the microphone or the speaker, or the air vibrating against your eardrums. Before any of that, before tonight, before this year, before you were born, every cell in your body descended from cells that survived. Every ancestor in your line lived long enough to reproduce. Every quantum event in your history resolved in a way that led, eventually, to this moment, to you, listening, breathing, here. The odds against your existence are not calculable. They exceed any number we have words for. Yet here you are. This is not luck. This is selection. Think of it this way. You are the needle that threaded itself through infinite fabric. Countless branching points. Countless moments where the thread could have caught, could have frayed, could have ended. And here you are, on the other side. Not because you are special. Not because something chose you. But because only the threaded needles can wonder how they got through. And the needles that did not make it are not asking questions. They cannot. They exist in branches where existence ended. Only the survivors remain to be puzzled by their survival. This is not mysticism. This is mathematics. Cold, simple, inevitable mathematics. Every moment of your life contained branching possibilities, quantum fluctuations in your neural chemistry. random mutations that could have been lethal, the car that did not swerve, the infection that cleared, the fall that did not quite happen. In other branches, those events ended differently. In those branches, you are not listening to this. You cannot listen to anything. But those branches are not your branches. They never were. You exist only in the branches where you exist. This sounds obvious, almost circular, but sit with it for a moment. The tautology hides something profound. You are asking why you survived, but the question itself is the answer. Only survivors ask. Only the living wonder about living. The wondering and the living are the same thing, viewed from different angles. This is a cosmic lottery where the prize is asking about the prize. You won by definition, and the winning feels exactly like ordinary existence. It feels like nothing special at all. It feels like Tuesday, like breathing, like wondering what to have for breakfast. That ordinariness is the most extraordinary thing about it. We have spent this entire journey exploring the horror of quantum immortality, the endless suffering, the asymptotic fading, the branches full of damaged copies desperately clinging to consciousness. All of that may be true. The mathematics does not care about our comfort, but there is another way to see it. You are already the survivor of uncountable branching events. You have already threaded through the infinite fabric. Yes, the cosmic rays that passed through your body today did not trigger the fatal mutation in your branch. The quantum fluctuations in your brain chemistry resolved into coherent thought rather than catastrophe. You are already the miracle. The horror and the wonder are the same thing. It depends on where you stand. It depends on which direction you look. Why this branch? Why now? Why you? The mathematics cannot answer. And maybe that is not a failure. And maybe that is where the math ends and you begin. The equations describe the branching. They map the possibilities. They predict the proportions. But they do not explain what it feels like to be here, in this particular thread, wondering about threads. That part is yours. That part has always been yours. Physics gave us the multiverse. It showed us the branching, the selection, the survival. But it cannot tell us what survival means. And it cannot explain why consciousness follows one path and not another. It cannot bridge the gap between quantum mechanics and the feeling of existing. That gap is not a flaw in the theory. It is the edge of theory itself, the place where description ends and experience begins. You are standing at that edge right now. You have always been standing there. The edge is not somewhere else. The edge is wherever you are. Here, Hugh Everett threw his ashes in the garbage because he believed the body did not matter. His daughter followed him because she believed death was a doorway. But here, in this branch, in this moment, you are still breathing. And that is enough. We have traveled a long road tonight, through physics and tragedy, through mathematics and grief, through branches that split and split again, forever, without end. The wave function never collapses. Not in Copenhagen, not in Princeton, not in the quiet room where you are listening to this. The branching continues. It has always continued. It will continue long after every star has burned to ash and every galaxy has scattered into cold silence. This is not a theory anymore. Not for you. You have lived with it now. You have felt its weight. In one branch, you fell asleep an hour ago. In another branch, you turned this off and never heard these words. In still another, something happened today that changed everything. But not in this branch. In this branch, you are here. You made it through. Not luck, not fate, not the universe choosing you, just physics. And somehow, that is comforting now. The hard problem remains. We do not know what consciousness is. We cannot explain why there is something it is like to be you. The mathematics describes the branching, maps the probabilities, predicts the patterns, but it cannot follow the thread of your experience, and it loses track of you somewhere between the equations and the feeling of existing. Consciousness threads through infinite fabric. Somewhere, in branches we cannot see, that thread continues even after this particular story ends. But where it goes, physics cannot follow. That boundary is real. That mystery is permanent. Hugh Everett believed he knew what waited on the other side. His daughter believed it too. She wrote it in her final note. The physics supports them. The math is clear. And yet, the experience of this moment remains yours alone, unexplained, inexplicable. The one thing the theory cannot touch. You have already died today, in some branch, in many branches. The quantum events that passed through your body found their fatal paths in worlds you will never know. But those are not your worlds. They never were. You are the improbable survivor of every quantum event that ever touched you. Tomorrow you will survive a few more, and the day after that, until eventually, in some branch, you do not, but not in this one. Not tonight. Close your eyes now. Let the questions fade. Let the branches blur into something soft and distant. The mystery that seemed so terrifying at the start of this journey has become something else, something quieter. The unanswered questions are not walls. They are open spaces, room to breathe. The wondering and the living are the same thing. You are still breathing. Good night. Sleep well. And try not to think too hard about how many versions of you are closing their eyes right now. In this branch, you made it. That is enough.